Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Curiosity Key podcast, where I'm joined with Javed Khattak. So welcome, Javed. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Pleased to be here and very excited in terms of the work you're doing. And hopefully we can, kind of explore something interesting today.
Absolutely. Really excited because you have such a fascinating background and skill set. And also, I think, being another curious being like myself, there's a lot of value that we can give to our listeners and a lot of different things that we can cover. So I just want to give you this opportunity to really introduce yourself and your background in a nutshell. So, you've got a vast amount of experience over the years. So just distill that in a little intro.
Absolutely. That is always a bit of a challenge for me, I think, because I tend to talk a lot rather than my experience. But anyway, I'll try. So the name's Javed. I originally started in, kind of very corporate environment. It's a FTSE 100 large household brands. As an actuary, so I'm a qualified actuary as well, fellow of the Institute of Actuaries, and worked for some of the largest organizations like GlaxoSmithKline, HSBC, Thomson Reuters, PwC, and so on. Initially as an actuary, then went into management consulting for a few years. Fantastic experiences, but I always felt like I wanted to do a bit something of my own, something that kind of where I belong, creating value and so on. So about 3-4 years ago, I kind of stepped into a little bit in the startup and SME space. Very different world. Initially, I joined a company called Humanic, which was a blockchain-based financial inclusion project. They raised $5 million in an ICO. At the time, it was one of the earliest and one of the biggest ICOs. And I've always been a bit of a kind of technology geek at heart. So financial inclusion, giving back to society, very very close to me, very close to my heart. So that and technology, when they kind of overlap, that is for me, I think, a match made in heaven. So that opportunity, when it came about, it for me was a no-brainer to kind of jump ship, so to speak. And my previous corporate career so far, I'm happy with that decision. So was there for about a year, and then since then have moved on to other projects, other things, which includes a property crowdfunding platform of my own that I founded with my brother. It's called Zisk Properties. We've just launched it in the UK after 2 years long pilot in Pakistan. Alongside, I'm also working for another blockchain-based technology company called Studium. And creating my own software house and so on. So I'm involved in quite a few different things at the moment. Very different to kind of world compared to the, £6 billion funds that I used to manage versus, kind of startups, where some of these startups are, kind of just ideas and being developed from scratch. So I think hopefully that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, brilliant. And you're definitely a man after my own heart. Technology and giving back to society and just helping make the world a better place. We need more people like yourself doing these things. So you speak a lot about blockchain technology, and there are so many different definitions as to what blockchain is. There's a lot of misconceptions in the industry. So again, in a nutshell, what is blockchain technology?
So I think blockchain technology, in simplest words, I would say is essentially sort of a database of different records. It can store essentially anything, but the way the technology works is stored on many computers simultaneously, and that makes it immutable or sort of hack-proof in a way. And obviously I can go into more detail in terms of how the technology works. And there are many different types of, kind of blockchains, or more appropriately called distributed ledger technologies. But it is something very different to, kind of Bitcoin, one of kind of key misconceptions. And I generally see the technology as a key enabler. I think it could really massively disrupt. But At the same time, I think the technology, while it has matured a lot over the past few years, I think there's still some way to go. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute perfect sense. So just leading into those common misconceptions, because, if I speak to people about blockchain, there's still a lot I don't know about the technology, but most people I speak to always associate blockchain and Bitcoin, but that's not always the case. So what other misconceptions are there in the industry about blockchain technology?
So I think, first off, the Bitcoin and blockchain misconception, I think obviously there's a lot that has been done online to try and educate people that Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, or some people, kind of define it as a crypto asset. That is obviously the asset's value is dependent upon, kind of market forces, demand and supply. Blockchain, or distributed ledger technology, or DLTs for short, that is essentially the technology or cryptographic technology that was devised, kind of to be able to execute the vision of Bitcoin. So they're two different things. Blockchain or DLTs can be used for cryptocurrencies or other crypto assets. They can be something like Bitcoin, where essentially the value is, kind of more based on demand and supply rather than a physical asset. At the same time, DLTs can be used to record physical assets and convert them into fractional assets or crypto assets and so on. And at the same time, like I said, it's a database, so you could record anything on it: IDs, kind of date of births, transactional records of any kinds of transactions, property, purchases, sales, etc. So I think one key thing to just remember is Bitcoin is a particular use case of a particular blockchain, essentially.
Yeah, I think that describes it absolutely brilliantly, and leads me on to my next point, which is, because you've already answered that a little bit, which is around how you see blockchain being an enabler for financial inclusion, which is something that you spoke about before. So in terms of how is this an enabler for making the world a better place and giving people an access to something that they wouldn't normally be able to access?
Absolutely. So I think, like different generations of technology, internet back in the day, I don't know, television, radio, the light bulb. So, kind of, it just keeps on improving life in different ways, facilitating things that were, not possible previously, providing solutions and so on. So the way I see, kind of blockchain technology, it essentially allows us to provide efficiency, reduce the number of people and stakeholders involved in any type of a transaction, creates trust in a trustless environment. What that means is, in simple words, is that generally when you're kind of conducting any transaction of value, so there would obviously, you would require two parties, and when those two parties end up engaging in a transaction, there would need to be an element of trust. Sometimes that element of trust is a piece of paper, kind of regulated by, I don't know, the laws of England and Wales type of thing, or it could be a bank or a financial institution in the middle, or a broker, estate agent, etc., etc. What blockchain does, or provides the facility through, kind of smart contracts and the immutability and the consensus protocols, again, depends on the blockchain. It allows to create trust between people who do not know each other, which, kind of reduces the need for any external parties to an extent. Similarly, like I touched upon earlier, efficiency, microtransactions, allowing through technology access to financial services or different types of, kind of services or solutions to areas where previously providing access to somebody who's, I don't know, living on $2 or $5 a day somewhere in the world, like, I don't know, Africa, banks or financial institutions would need to set up shop, which means a lot of fixed costs, a lot of regulatory requirements to be met. And for that to be recouped, they need obviously enough customers and that are able to have, kind of sufficient transactions or sufficient value of transactions. But if you're looking at, kind of small patchy neighborhoods, villages, locations, then you see people, we as part of humanity, we conducted, kind of various researches in Africa, and you would see that people would need to travel hours to, kind of get to the closest bank. And even on top of that, they wouldn't have, kind of their ID documents, because it's a bureaucratic system and so on and so forth. So blockchain provides a technology that can be an answer to, kind of all of these issues, just, kind of because it provides those answers to, kind of those issues that previously weren't possible. But I always like to, kind of remind people that at the end of the day, blockchain is still a technology. It would only become as successful as one, how much the technology matures. So, the issues that are prevalent within the technology, they're resolved. The blockchain community is very actively, kind of working on those. Secondly, and I think maybe even more importantly, how the adoption, how many people are educated on it. And it's not about what is blockchain, it is about how can we use this to improve our lives. And I think the third is the key players and stakeholders, governments, large institutions, etc., them allowing the use or, kind of adoption of the technology. Because at the end of the day, if you're putting in physical assets or providing services, etc., blockchain would only go so far, because in the physical world, it's human beings. So we need to interact with blockchain to ultimately, kind of make use of it. So I hope, kind of that answers the question.
Yes, no, it's brilliant. It's really, really, like, I personally find this absolutely fascinating. And in one way, selfishly, this is why I set up this podcast, because I'm like, I really want to know more about all of this types of technology, how it's being used in the world. So why don't I just interview people that can come and talk about it and then share that information with everybody else?
Fantastic.
So yeah, no, it's brilliant. So how, because, it's an emerging technology, it's an enabler, it's a very new market, and there's a lot of misconceptions around it. So how are you educating the market, and how are you approaching the challenge of making people aware of the benefits and bringing it to market, essentially?
So my view has on this been, I think, two-pronged. I don't know, some people may agree, some people may not, as is always the case. One is that through digital marketing, social media, seminars, speaking opportunities, whatever may come about, try and just help educate people that, blockchain is simply a technology. Don't be scared of it. Yes, there has been a crypto buzz. People have, kind of made lots of money, some people, and then there are people who have been burnt as well. There are, because of that, kind of, and rightly so, regulators trying to warn people, but it's a very interesting environment, warnings, and suddenly people are scared, and, other companies just renaming their names to blockchain or something connected to blockchain, even if they have got nothing to do with even technology, let alone, the DLTs or blockchain itself, just to get a short-term, kind of share price rise. So I think one piece is just education, but in simpler words. And the other piece is create solutions and services that are providing value to the end user, thinking about the issues of the end user, and then focusing on the benefits that they would be getting from that particular solution. So for example, for Zisk Properties, we're testing blockchain. Now, in the market, I have seen many crowdfunding platforms that essentially don't use blockchain. So they don't have anything to do with, kind of blockchain. They just, kind of using the traditional technology to implement or execute this, kind of new PropTech facility or solution. But then there are so many companies out there in the blockchain space that within the PropTech space that would just market themselves, oh, we've got blockchain, we're using blockchain, and these are the benefits, and use us. And there are countless out there. My view is, why not just forget about blockchain per se, we, for example, in Zisk Properties, we've got a solution. You or anybody else can come and invest into a property from £100. And if you do it via blockchain, once it's live, then we would, kind of not focus on maybe somewhere in fine print, etc., or somewhere we might put in, okay, powered by blockchain or this particular blockchain, but focus more on the benefits that, okay, if you do it through Zisk Properties, because we use, the technology we use, your records can't be hacked. They're, immutable, blah, 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 and they're efficient. They're quick in terms of cost, we can pass on the benefits to you. So if we, I think, do those two things generally out there within, the blockchain community, educate and create services and then focus on the benefits to the end user, I think hopefully we would, kind of remove those misconceptions.
Oh, and I love it because I talk about this all of the time. And you've touched on the fact that blockchain is an enabler. Technology in general is an enabler. It has to solve a problem. Otherwise, why would anybody want it? But I think both of us have talked about being tech geeks. It's like the new shiny object. You want it because it's new and it's exciting. But generally, it's because it helps you achieve a particular goal or an objective or an outcome. And I think a lot of technology companies fall into the trap of trying to sell the technology too much and lose focus on the problem that technology is solving, because otherwise then your customers, your prospects and people will completely disengage from that.
Absolutely correct.
So yeah, what are the biggest lessons that you learn, and I guess my first question on that really is like, what advice would you give somebody else starting completely from scratch based on your experiences on both sides of the fence?
Absolutely. So I think one key thing that we all read about, we all hear about, is that people to any business is the heart and soul. And I think that when I say people, I mean both your end users or customers as well as your team. And the amount of emphasis that we end up putting on a team in any organization, I think, is needs to be significantly more when it's a startup, because the amount of resources you've got is already, there's already a challenge there. So having the right team and the right people, I think I found that. Obviously, that was, that I've been used to working with some of the best minds in the world, and I've been fortunate enough to, learn from them and groom people and so on and so forth. But I never knew how challenging it could be to find the right people within, the startup and SME space, because you've got a limited budget. So you might not be, giving salaries at all initially. You might be, offering equity, or you might be offering a bit of both. Even if you are offering, a bit of a pay or, project-based type of a role or whatever, that would also have to be, a bit lower end of the spectrum and so on. So that automatically means that the wider pool that you've got available, most people, I've come to realize, are very, very risk averse when it comes to, life, paying bills, family responsibilities, and so on. Rightly so, absolutely. But I think we underestimate how difficult it can be to find the right people. And by right people, the other thing I also realize is that I think one key thing that you need to watch out for, the world's becoming a global village. There are, access to other countries very easily, get access to people from other, countries to provide their services and solutions. Brilliant. You at times, find a very good deal or, very good rates, but always be careful. And I think that actually doesn't necessarily just apply to overseas or offshore type of arrangements. It even applies to, people actually that I worked with within the UK. So there are scamsters and fraudsters out there. Be careful. People overpromise and underdeliver. Then there are those people as well that actually are good people, want to do hard work, but their skill set or their mindset or both are not the right fit. they might be, kind of 9 to 5. Okay, I need to do this, and that's it. And if they're of that mindset in a startup, a lot of the times you don't know where you're going, kind of the next day. You don't want to be reminding people or running or after people or chasing people, have you done this or not, and so on. So you want people who are proactive, who are creative, who are kind of bought into the idea, absolutely bought into the idea, and they're incentivized in the right manner as well, so that as a community, as a family, you can kind of work on it. And the other thing I learned was, I think these probably are the two biggest lessons for me if you're starting from scratch. One, make sure that you start with a small number of people, but quality. Don't go big. You don't need a large number of people. I've seen kind of startups with 5 people, kind of turning around revenues of 100K or even a million plus. Whilst I've seen other startups with 15, 20, 25 people, and they're kind of not even revenue generating or loss making. So finding the right people. And then the other flip side is, I coming from kind of large corporate backgrounds, etc. And maybe my father was a bit like that as well, going big, going all out kind of thing. So when we started our initial pilot, a lot of kind of investment just put into it and wanting to go big. I had a very good friend of mine, and I was just starting out in the startup world. So obviously spoke to kind of various people and started educating myself, but I think the education was a little bit later than I should have. And I did get that advice at the beginning. That's the only advice I do remember from that person, that even if you've got the funds, do not start big. Kind of hold on to your funds, start small, start with a very data-driven approach, very fact-driven approach. Kind of develop hypothesis. After that, develop experiments, small experiments, quick experiments, and not perfect, good enough experiments that are cost efficient or cost effective. And based on that, keep refining and keep scaling up step by step. And then, once a model or a product or a solution is starting to prove itself, you're getting direct feedback from your customers or end users, start putting in the funds at that point in time and start going, kind of growing. So I think those are the two biggest lessons I would kind of pass on to anybody who's starting afresh.
Oh, that is brilliant advice. And what I will do is I'm going to re-listen to this podcast and then condense that advice and put that in the show notes, because everybody will benefit from that. But in terms of recruiting, so, I've had my fair share of recruitment challenges over the years. It's definitely not an easy task, and a big source of stress whilst trying to do everything else whilst finding the right people. If you could sort of pinpoint 3 things that help you get the right people into your company, what would those 3 things be?
Very good question. A difficult one as well. I think one is you probably get a bit of a gut feel, but that comes after experience. So you can't rely on that at the outset. Maybe you're one of those people who are kind of gifted and you can learn people very quickly. Great. I think I've been told I'm not that bad at kind of reading people, but I have kind of noticed. Sorry, I've just got a random pop-up on my computer, so let me get rid of that. Right. So like I was saying, that if you're one of those kind of people, I think I'm not that bad, at least. Even so, you have to kind of go more than just with your gut feel. I think first step is the usual, which I think is very common, standard process. Get the CVs, do your due diligence, look at kind of their past experience, look at their skill set, and then get on a call with them, because we all know CVs versus the actual person, can differ. And secondly, the skill set might be right, but the chemistry might not be there, or them being bought into your vision or idea might not be there, and so on. So I think first step is that. As part of that, make sure that when you're going through the CV, you don't we've got this ability that when you really want something, then you have I have a tendency that you try to hope for the best or wish for the best. You kind of see, okay, this person's got, I don't know, 2 years in kind of blockchain, but that is Ethereum based experience, and I'm doing something in Hyperledger. Maybe you can kind of quickly skill up. So always whenever you catch yourself doing that, then make sure you bring yourself back to grounding and realize that you will be taking a risk. As long as it's a calculated risk and you've got backups, it's fine, but otherwise try and avoid those risks. So I think that's one, kind of doing your due diligence. Secondly, get in a contract in place, again, very transparent, very kind of at the outset, that if you're joining, the contract has to be done in a way that if you work whatever number of hours, part-time, full-time, whatever, equity-based or not, in particular for equity, that the vesting happens after a certain, kind of period, probation period or whatever, 3 months, 6 months, a year. So if that person leaves before that, or poor performance and you need to, kind of get rid of them, then you don't, kind of get to, you aren't required to give away potentially valuable equity. That way, once you've got them in, you have that time frame to test them. And I think that is the most important thing. Connected to that, I probably, kind of push that out as a separate third item, that once you've got the person in, do not, and it would sound very harsh, and I'm coming from very, very difficult experiences on this, do not give a person more than maybe 2 chances. Because I started out, I tried teaching people, tried getting training for them, tried investing time into them. But if they don't have the right mindset, if they don't have the right skills, as a startup, you do not have the time or the resources to train people. You need the right people that can, kind of hit the ground running. And if they are not the right people, give them an opportunity. Of course, if they have difficulties, family difficulties, circumstances, I've had somebody who actually, due to family issues, they ended up having to take, kind of a few months off. Absolutely not a problem. And then after that, they came back because it was a brilliant resource and brilliant team member. So that aside, if you kind of see that a person is not the right fit for any number of reasons, give them 1 chance, second chance, say adios, next. And I think I can't stress on that enough. It might sound harsh, but think about it in a way that once you're big enough, you can, kind of train people, help people. And remember, separate your charitable initiatives and business. You become successful and help, kind of, if you want to do charity, but don't do charity within your business.
That's great advice. And you also touched a lot about that kind of hope for the best. I just keep thinking of sort of friends of mine that have had relationships where it's just like, oh, well, I hope that this may change. It's the same in business. And you find yourself doing that. I hope somebody will understand what I mean in this piece of marketing. I hope that somebody really got my point in this sales presentation. And it's a really risky strategy and not always very effective. So yeah, 3 great pieces of advice there. A couple that I'd love to add to that as well is that, because you spoke before about behaviors and motivations, especially when you're working for a small company, a small startup, you need to make sure that the motivations of the individual are there and that the contract and the benefits that you're providing meet their individual motivations. Just as a common example that I use all the time is when employing salespeople, not every salesperson is motivated by money. There are so many salespeople that are motivated by actually enabling change or enabling people to benefit from something. All of the salespeople that work for social enterprises and charities and things like that as well, being a prime example. A lot of people presume that they automatically understand the motivations of others. So when you understand them and ask them what their motivations are, my common question was, so I was like, what's important to you? So if I'm interviewing somebody, I always ask them what's important to you. And then I'm a bit annoying and I'm like, and what else? And what else? And they're sat there going, I don't know. Because it's so important. And the more you can meet their needs, the better they're going to perform as an employee and as a key part of the team and a key part of the company. So yeah, it's absolutely key and brilliant advice that you've given there.
And I can't agree more. When I said make sure that the person or the team's the right fit, the right mindset, and the right skills. If you're a person that wants to make a difference, kind of through solutions, financial inclusion, whatever, and you're at the outset attracting people who are in it for the money, in the short term that might work, but in the long term I've seen then massive differences coming about because their motivations are more profit driven or numbers driven, and it is so, and again I think this becomes important at all levels, that you have to make sure that you the chemistry is there, the motivations, the goals, why you're doing something is you both can kind of connect on it. So I can't agree more.
Absolutely. And this leads perfectly onto my next section, because we've spoken about this at length before, which is all around, sort of doing business as a force for good and being able to give back. Something I talk a lot about is that you don't need to be turning huge profits. You don't need to be a massive company before you can embed charitable giving, or you can embed a giving strategy into your business. So I talk about this quite a lot. I've got a lot of information on my website about how I do this, but how, from your point of view, can a small startup focus on giving back whilst also focusing on the growth of the company?
I think that's a very important question, and completely agree that I think it's all about the mindset. And I think that before coming to kind of the business world, if I just look at my own example, and I look at doing charity, obviously without going into too much detail, if I end up, I find myself kind of thinking, I want to make a difference. I want to, the next time I see this particular charity, or the ones that I tend to try to help, and so on, I will give X amount. But when it comes to actually giving that amount, at that point in time, it's like, wait, I've got these bills to pay, I've got that thing coming up, and so on and so forth. And at that point in time, you're like, whatever you were intending to pay, usually you end up kind of reducing that. So I've had that experience, and I've noticed that's just a mindset. That's probably that. I think two things working simultaneously, at least for me. One is that risk averseness, that if I'm kind of spending money on this right now, what could I be using this money for other tasks? The other thing is, oh wait, so if I don't use that money for kind of charity right now, £10, and I put it into the business or something else, then later on I could do £100 or £1,000 because I'd have more money and whatever. And I have realized that at a personal level, as well as from a business perspective, it is better to avoid that, because if you keep doing that, the amount of benefit you would do in the world would be limited, and we don't know at what point in time our life would come to an end. So let's try and kind of make as much of a difference as we can, small or big, kind of till the time we've got on this planet. So from a business perspective, Zisk Properties, when we were doing our pilot, I think using the example of that would probably portray a real life kind of scenario where we've tried doing that when it was a pilot, when we didn't have any external kind of resources and funding and so on, and how simple it is or can be done. So I think first off, if your product is focused on helping people, then, or even if it's not, you can always build in kind of various metrics, various kind of potential ways of helping people through your business. And I think there's probably two categories I can separate, at least two categories I can separate kind of particular types of solution from a charitable perspective. One is the organization is a fully profit-making business, and the product it sells, it hopefully has a positive impact in the world, but it doesn't directly I don't know, benefit kind of people. So for example, I don't know, selling luxury cars. So you're a profit making business and so on, but you could then set aside either directly your profits, or kind of get engaged in initiatives where you can do good. Whilst the other type of products can be like I was talking about, Zisk Properties, our crowdfunding platform. The idea came about because we wanted to allow and enable people, especially in those parts of the world where people needed the most, to have an opportunity to invest into something they understand and is simple, from something that is also affordable. So the product itself is focused or aimed at helping people. If you've got the first one as a startup, I think it would become a little bit difficult to directly, kind of start helping people. But even then, if you have that mindset, if I can give £10 today, let's just give that £10, and we'll think about the rest later. If you've got the second type, I think it becomes a lot more easier, because if you just focus on your product, and if you focus on your end user providing solutions, you will automatically be helping people. So in our example, when we were doing our pilot, we ended up, throughout our pilot, we had about 200 plus type of investors over a period of just under 2 years. In one, in the major city in Pakistan, which is Karachi. And within that period, while we had 200 investors, about a third of that was, kind of more high-end type of investors who were doing, kind of well off and so on. A third of that was people who were, kind of earning good incomes, but not, kind of necessarily or massively in need. And then the bottom third we ended up seeing was the people that ended up, kind of were finding it very difficult to make ends meet. So we ended up kind of deciding that whilst we're doing this, why not alongside focus on these, kind of third people who are more in need, to offer, to create additional offerings as well as additional educational piece. Of course, in Pakistan, we didn't have the same FCA, kind of restrictions that we have at the moment in the UK, and hopefully we can, kind of find various solutions to that in due course once we've got scale. But in Pakistan, so we started educating people within that, kind of needs that, okay, getting out, reaching out to them, asking them, what are your needs? What are the problems? And one key thing that we kept hearing was, we're trying to save to get on a property ladder. We're renting at the moment, kind of all of that money, kind of essentially goes to waste. And obviously they do not have the understanding or the financial ability to, kind of put down money for a deposit. And in Pakistan, the mortgage rates are much, the interest rates are much higher for that. And like I said, even if they could afford that, the deposit would, kind of make it restrictive. And then even if they could afford that, their credit scores and, financial credibility and documentation, etc., that would not allow them to get on the property ladder. So a lot of them ended up having savings. A lot of them ended up having 2 or 3 or 4 people working in the same family, like 2 eldest sons and the father working. So we, started working with them that, okay, whatever investments or savings you have, you could, if your target is to invest into a property and buy a property, if you invest into a property and the property market even goes down, you're still, as long as you're sufficiently diversified, you're, kind of sufficiently targeting similar type of market, you would still, kind of not face the same amount of risks, because property market dips, your investment dips, but the property that you want to buy, that also dips. And that's, kind of you're protected. So educating them on that. Then through our investment calculator that, we've devised and we put on our website, people can go in and actually look at the power of saving, regular saving. If you're saving, in Pakistan it's rupees, here pounds, I don't know, £500 a month, and investing into something, as long as you're not losing capital, that saving itself with a bit of return even could, kind of be very shocking and surprising to people if you look at, kind of the numbers in 5 years time or 10 years time. So some of these people ended up having a savings pot, plus with regular savings on a monthly basis, and us working with them, and trying to devise a plan for them that, if invest in these type of properties, diversify, and few years down the line you could have a part where you could kind of buy property, your own property. And at least we were, I wouldn't want to say lucky, but we ended up getting some fantastic returns through our contacts, property development network, experience within the local property market, such that at least I know off the top of my head that for about 3 to 5 families, we ended up helping them just over this under 2-year period, because they had enough of a savings pot as well. About kind of 40% of the total came from their initial savings, and then over the kind of 2-year period, their continuous savings combined with some fantastic returns, I think 20% or 25% after our fees over that period in the property market.
Yeah.
So that meant that those families, before we ended the pilot, we, through our contacts within the estate agents kind of network and so on, actually we had even kind of opened our own small estate agency practice for this particular reason. And we actually ended up helping them then kind of sell their investments and buy their own properties. So that's kind of a way where, even though we didn't have massive funds and so on, our product offering, we just thought about a slightly addition to our existing product offering, focusing on a particular need, and very quickly kind of helping people.
Yeah. And there's so much power in education. It's that kind of, you can really empower people to be able to do more and then pass on that knowledge. And in addition to that as well, the education that you offer, you can get additional insights from your market. You can learn more about the questions that they're asking, the challenges that they face, whilst you're continually improving your offering. So yeah, education there's just so many different benefits of educating your market and educating your customers as well.
Absolutely.
A lot of because I'm in the sort of like the first bracket. So what I do is I enable people to sort of sell more, grow their businesses, generate new clients. So it's not necessarily kind of directly helping people from a people in need point of view. So what I do is then I have a kind of business giving strategy where I donate and give to projects that focus around education in parts of the world that need it. So there's a lot of projects in India that I support, empowering women for, giving them entrepreneurial skills, or like helping them understand how to grow a business. Sort of like getting kids, especially girls, into school in Cambodia as well, because then that stops sex trafficking. And it's like education just has so much power to solve so many of the world's problems anyway. So
absolutely. So I've got a small education coaching center in Pakistan as well. So very close to my heart in terms of kind of even education, and we have big ambitions. Obviously, at the moment, busy in too many things, but maybe going to formal education even. And the focus there is at the moment, kind of certifications and tooling, providing kind of education or skills or certifications in areas where there is a need and a demand, but you don't kind of find immediate access to kind of education. And I've read this famous quote. One of my partners in one of the businesses I'm involved in uses it often, that give a man a fish and they will survive for kind of one day, but teach a man to kind of fish, then you've kind of taught them or helped them throughout for their entire life.
Yeah, they'll never go hungry again.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so completely agree.
Yeah, I love it. And I've realized that we've been talking for quite a while, so I will try and wrap this up as quickly as possible. But the last section that I did want to get to, because I know that you've got a lot of experience in this, and I know that this will benefit a lot of our listeners as well, which is all around investment. And, if you're starting a new business, a tech startup, you're starting from scratch, your investment comes from either your own pocket, it comes from the customers that you're putting into. And then the third strand of that is that you go for external investment. So we've spoken about this before. So can you talk a little bit about kind of like, when is the right time for a startup that is self-funded to then start going and looking for investment?
Absolutely. Again, another great question. I think for that particular question, there are some tips and tricks or kind of some standard things that we as entrepreneurs can think about, but I would like to also highlight that there's no one right answer or one size fits all, of course. But I think what I have noticed is that if you go to, so initially you need to, like I said, don't go big, get enough, funding, whatever source, friends, family, etc. And test and scale up slowly. Don't, kind of put your, yes, there's an argument to be had where if you believe in an idea, you really, really, really back it up, but don't, kind of put your family or, kind of responsibilities and so on in jeopardy, and be sensible to start. But once you've started, started and you've got enough funds and you start testing the idea in a sensible fashion, in a systematic, data-driven fashion, then focus on the product, focus on the solution that you're trying to offer, focus on your end users, trying to get feedback, get in front of them. A lot of people end up thinking that if I have the funds, then this will be successful. I think that's a very wrong way of thinking about a startup. You always need to focus on, like I said, people, and your product. And when you end up doing that, you end up empowering yourself and your team that, money is, while a restriction, it isn't a hindrance to success. And with that mindset, you can achieve a lot. Find creative ways of, kind of doing things and so on and so forth. But once you've got, kind of sufficient data behind you, sufficient customers, it's a repeatable process. Then you can go to these different forms of investment raising methods to try and scale up. Of course, initially you might, depends whether you started with a seed investment or you started even smaller than that, and then once you've got the idea proven or semi-proven, then you get a bit of seed investment. Obviously, depending upon, you might have to give a big chunk of your equity away at that point in time. And after that, VCs and different types of funds and so on, angel investors, etc. But I think there is a balance to be had, because if you go too early, one, you won't get traction. Nobody would actually want to listen to your pitch and so on, because I've been on the other side as well. These guys receive, I don't know, tens of or hundreds even of emails and pitches every day from startups around the globe. So you need to be different and you need to be proven. And a lot of these startups would be exactly trying to do that. A lot of these might be a lot more progress than you. So you need to have something substantial to go to them with. And then secondly, if you go too early, and if you did find an investor who would bite, they would usually ask for a much bigger chunk of equity, because the value they would put on your startup would be a lot smaller. So there's a balance to be had, i.e. not going too, kind of early, but at the same time, not waiting too late, because if you're scaling up and, the idea is proven and funds is only the only restricting factor, then get on it quickly, scale up quickly, because it's a very fast moving world out there. Probably whatever you're trying to do, there's 10 or 100 other people doing the same thing. And it's a little bit more about perseverance, determination, and the way you execute. So I personally, yes, there might be, something to be said around making sure that your idea is protected, but don't end up, getting bogged down too much about your idea, unless it's a really novel, I don't know, a cancer breakthrough or something like that.
Yeah.
Other than that, if you're working on something, most likely there's at least one person around the world that is working on the same thing, is,
Yeah.
kind of my mindset. So if you balance that, then I think it would be easy enough to, kind of get investment. Because once you've got a proven product or a solution, then the conversation, you end up getting a lot more power in conversations with investors. You'd get a lot more investors interested. Another thing to bear in mind is network. because if you are trying to raise funding, often people find it very, very difficult to get in front of the right people. So, tap into your LinkedIn profiles and, friends of friends and whatever. There are experts that have access to either family offices or angel investors, or just, kind of that is what they do. They've got a huge network. They end up usually charging a commission for successful investments. They might have a fixed fee, etc. So try and, search for those type of professionals, or directly speaking to family offices for that matter. And I think there are also, especially in kind of cities like London, a lot of events and so on where investors kind of come about. There might be an investment. So for you to set up stall or getting a ticket, etc., you might kind of have to pay I don't know, £500 or a couple of £1,000, depending upon the event. Don't be afraid to invest into those type of events, but do your due diligence beforehand. Again, don't hope, it's an investor, kind of summit or investor conference or whatever, and I'd get fantastic, kind of response. Look at actual facts. The people who are trying to sell you the tickets, ask difficult questions. Do you have any track record of, kind of previous investors attending? Which type of VCs attend? Which sector is the focus on? How many startups have attended? And do you have any figures around the kind of investment they have received? And those kind of things. So I think those are the various, ways to make sure that you actually get in front of the right people. And persevere. You will get in front of probably 100 people before kind of you find one person who's like, I like that. And the final piece, I think, for investment perspective, it's all about an important aspect is valuation. Different people, different funds, kind of follow different valuation models and methods. There are some market standards around pre-revenue or post-revenue type of valuation models. Some people kind of tend to look at discounted cash flow approaches, while other people kind of look at a multiple based approach, EBITDA multiple, or gross profit, etc., or net profit, kind of multiple revenue multiples, depending upon your industry. So make sure that whatever your industry is, you do a bit of kind of background research to understand what kind of, not only the industry, but also the type of people that you're meeting, because an angel investor might be it might be a much more story-based or a story-driven conversation. Whilst with a VC, it might be a lot more data, numbers, financial models, Excel spreadsheets, kind of discount rates for the cash flow model or projections or whatever. So understand who you're getting in front of. Try to do a bit of background homework in terms of what is important to them, and then pitch that. Your investor pitch deck, your slides, your model, whatever it is, focus on that side of things. For example, I have seen myself a startup that I was advising. The same startup getting valued at $2 million versus $35 million. At the same time. One was, kind of an angel investor based out, in UAE, and he was really bought into the vision and the idea and making a difference. Whilst the other was, kind of a more European-based fund that specialized in startups. So very different, kind of conversations, very different valuation methodologies, and so on. So I hope, kind of those bits and bobs from my experience would help, kind of people from the investment perspective within the startup space.
It's absolutely wonderful advice. And again, it's that kind of, sounding like a broken record, because if you've listened to many of my podcast episodes or listened to me talk, I talk a lot about, understanding the motivations and the behaviors and the drivers of your target market. And it's the same when you're looking for investment. Different investors will have different motivations. Some investors will want to put their money into more sort of socially driven businesses that want to give back. Others are more driven by the data, the statistics. And their questions will be dictated based on their motivations. So the more you can do your homework and research the people that you're actually targeting, the better you will be in terms of putting yourself in front of them. So absolutely, yeah, brilliant advice. And like I said, I will go through this podcast episode and write out the show notes so people can, there's a lot that people can gain from listening to this and then taking it away and learning and implementing as well.
Fantastic.
Because I talk about this all the time. It's like, you read books, everybody reads books, they go on courses, they do all of this learning, but all of this learning is futile unless you're actually implementing these things and actually doing what you've learned.
Absolutely. I mean, those are golden words. Absolutely true. If you have education and you don't implement it, no point of that education. If you have a small amount of education, but you're really, kind of implementing it effectively, probably that's more effective than, kind of the first example. And I think another thing is discipline. If you have a few minutes to spare and educate yourself, and then a few minutes a day to implement something, do it. Is better than not doing it. So, and it's in Urdu we've got a saying. I'm trying to translate that every drops actually end up making an ocean. So it's those small disciplined efforts of implementation that can make a difference. And one, kind of other thing to add, and I think every entrepreneur or startup, kind of founder would probably relate to that every so often you end up having those days where it's like, you know what, I want to just give up or quit and so on. Obviously, you have to be, kind of very sensible, i.e. if you've been at something and you have sufficient data, again, going back to that experiments and fact-driven approach that suggests you should, kind of either stop that particular startup or pivot, kind of change lean startup methodology, kind of pivot and think about something else. That's absolutely fine. But if not, and it's human nature. I think every so often, every few days, it's that, kind of feeling that you just want to give up and so on. And I think more often than not, it is people who actually get through that, persevere through that, and continue implementing despite you not wanting to, get out of bed or wanting to quit, I think are the ones that stand a much higher chance of kind of achieving their goals and dreams and visions.
Absolutely. And I think it comes back down to network as well. So, your network is not just a place that you can go for advice and guidance, but also your network can challenge you and motivate you and inspire you to keep going even through those hard times. Because as we all know, running a business is never a plain sailing, easy job the whole time. So you do need people to kind of like lift you up and keep you going.
Absolutely correct. Can't agree more.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on this podcast. We could talk for hours about lots of various different things. And I hope our listeners have gained a huge amount from listening to you speak and listening in on your experience. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you or keep in contact, what's the best way of them doing that?
So I am starting to, kind of be a little bit more available online. I've got my own website, javedkhattak.com. You could, kind of reach me through there, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. As usual. And obviously, Zisk Properties, we've got an entire team on all my initiatives. So through any of these, it's very easy to get a hold of me.
Brilliant. And I will include all of these links in the show notes on my website, which is charliewyman.com/podcast. So Javed, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope to meet you in person again soon.
That is fantastic. Thank you very much. It was very exciting to be here. And I do really hope that your viewers end up actually benefiting in some way or the other.
I'm sure they will. Even if they take away just one thing from this podcast, I'm sure they will.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Bye.